Breach. It felt inevitable, right? It went after the not overturned, the upheld sneak. It was just like, okay, that's it. That's it. The Bills they're not going to win, right? That's just what it felt like to me, at least.
Renner, first, let me just say, I was 90% sure you were in a hotel room, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want you to be
You thought my
offended.
decor was just
That you decorated like you live in a hotel, and some people get. So anyway, glad to hear you are actually in a hotel room and alive. But yeah, here is the interesting thing is that we spent all week talking about how the Chiefs get all the calls. There's news breaking during the week that the NFL might start reviewing roughing the passer because of Patrick Mahomes. And that was literally the only talking point about the Chiefs leading up to this game. So I think the last thing the NFL wanted this to come down to was a controversial call that went in the Chiefs' favor. And that is absolutely what happened. I mean, we all saw, we talked about a little bit about it beforehand, but it was the 4th and 1. Josh Allen just tanking his way through. It looked like he had it. But the NFL said, yeah, we're going to go with the ruling on the field. And the ruling on the field was that he was 3 centimeters short, I believe. Was it 3 centimeters? That's what I got.
So when they went to spot it, the field judge on the right has him getting the first down. He's the one, if you see where Josh Allen's body is contorted, he's the one who can see the football. The field judge on the left comes in and he marks it short. They roll with the field judge on the left. Obviously, I don't know what those conversations are, who gets pressed in that situation, but that guy couldn't see the football. And so they run with a guy who couldn't see the football first off in his spot. Then on the replay, you never get like the perfect angle of the ball over the line, right? Like at one point, Chris Jones's helmet gets in the way. You don't see the football when Josh Allen's at his forward-most point. But if you have any sort of, and I think the word I used pre-show here before we got on there was triangulation ability, which I'm not sure is the correct way to phrase it. But if you have any way of actually like predicting that if the ball's here when I saw it last and his body moved to here, and then the ball, when I saw it again, hasn't moved in relation to his body, well, then we can say that the ball probably moved with his body the same amount and had crossed the line. So I think it was over. Again, like I'm not making excuses. The Chiefs went out and won that football game. They played an outstanding game. And truthfully, the Bills benefited from a ton of bounces. They had 4 fumbles in that game that they themselves recovered, the Buffalo Bills. So they were getting some bounces going their way. It felt like their chance to do it. But that one call, man, really hard to see how that one ended up going the Chiefs' way.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this, that it was close enough that I honestly, during the commercial break, thought they were going to stick with whatever was called on the field. And if people are wondering why was that play reviewed, starting with the 2023 season, if a 4th down if it's a failed conversion, it's automatically reviewed. It's essentially a turnover. If Josh Allen had gotten the first down and the Chiefs didn't think he got it, they would have had to challenge. But since he fell short, it's a turnover on downs, so you review. And it did look like it was so close. And the thing is, we have 917 cameras at this game. I am talking, we had a doink cam up there. There is so many cameras at an AFC Championship game that it was absolutely surprising that we didn't have an angle of where the football was when his forward progression stopped or when his knee hit. And so
I thought we'd have a sky cam.
Well, it felt like the best angle kind of came diagonally down onto the field where you could say, oh, it looks like Josh Allen, it looks like the one on the back of his jersey is across the line. And if that's across the line, the football has to be across the line. But because it was coming at a diagonal angle with Mike's triangulation theory, you're not straight on. So you can't say 100% for sure that he was across. But again, our guy Gene Sarator in the booth even said, yeah, it looks like he got it across by about a third of the football. So our rules analyst thought he got it across. Renner thought he got it across. And I'm staying neutral because I thought the call on the field should have stuck no matter what it was.
Now, the one call that I actually thought was probably the right call that was also controversial, the Xavier Worthy catch before. If you're going to say that he was the one who ultimately came down with possession of it, I think that was then the right call. Now, do you think he had possession? Who knows? The tie goes to the offense in those situations. So it did look like a tie. The ball hit the ground, but the ball did not move. He wrestled it away. I think that one's the right call. And ultimately, I think that one actually may have benefited the Bills because they went down and scored before the half. Whereas if the Chiefs had possessed the ball more, I'm not sure they would have had time to go down and score after the fact. So that one I don't think was nearly as impactful, but the sneak obviously was. The other thing that was impactful to me, though, in this game that I want to talk about, Christian Benford going out in the first drive or first quarter at minimum. That was it for the Buffalo Bills secondary. It seemed like they were lost. Kaiir Elam, I need someone to check his FanDuel account to see if we had some nefarious things at play here, because that guy, I don't know how that guy was a first rounder. That sequence back in 2022, I actually just tweeted this out, may have, where the Chiefs jumped up, because they talked about the Xavier Worthy trade on the broadcast a bunch, but they didn't talk about the fact that the Chiefs jumped over the Bills in 2022 when the Bills needed a cornerback. Chiefs knew it. Chiefs traded up, got Trent McDuffie. Bills end up with Kaiir Elam 2 picks later. Trent McDuffie's been a multiple-time All-Pro. Kaiir Elam can't even see the football field without tripping all over himself. That, to me, was kind of the difference in the game, was Christian Benford going out, your number one corner. All of a sudden, it was just a free-for-all in that receiver room for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. And Benford went out with about 3 minutes left in the first quarter. So it was essentially 3.5 quarters or 3.25 quarters where he's out. And if you're Sean McDermott, look, Sean McDermott's a defensive guy. He's a former defensive coordinator. I will say he's probably the biggest problem why they can't get over this hump in the playoffs is because the biggest mismatch on the field is Sean McDermott versus Andy Reid. But he actually looked not like the Sean McDermott we're used to seeing. He was aggressive on fourth down. I thought we were only judging by one quarter, but it did seem like he had a solid game plan in the first quarter where, hey, look, but Christian Benford was a huge part of that. So as soon as he goes down, you could see McDermott. It was just like, my God, for once I come up with this great game plan to slow down this offense, and now you're doing this to me? What is going on? So it did really feel like the defense took a huge step back after that injury.
Yeah, and just Kaiir Elam, man, I still can't get over just how it's the confidence. Like he was playing 15 yards off Xavier Worthy. I get like Xavier Worthy's fast. You don't want to give up a big play. If you're 15 yards off, you can't do anything. Like you're going to give up big plays left and right. You're going to give up medium plays left and right. Like it's just, that was abysmal to me with the Buffalo Bills and their defense. But I did think the Bills offensively, Joe Brady, you mentioned McDermott having, being outclassed by Andy Reid. I thought Joe Brady for the majority of that game had good plans for what the Chiefs were bringing. I thought he won the matchup with Spagnuolo because Josh Allen came out the first 2 drives of that game. He looked tilted, or at least he looked just like a little frazzled. The very first drive, he tried to throw 2 picks right off the bat. Second drive, he literally fumbles the snap. Like right in his breadbasket. I don't think I've ever seen Josh Allen do that. Just drop the snap from the shotgun. So he was not at himself, and they had a great game plan to, get the ball on the ground, run it very early on, run through the second half, and a lot of wide screens and things of that nature to spread the ball around. So I thought he had a better game plan than obviously the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, it was really interesting watching Allen. Like you said on that first series, he airmailed 2 passes that probably should have been picked off, like you mentioned. And it really felt like after the first kind of 2 possessions there where Josh Allen it looked like he had jitters, or whatever you get maybe when you're in your first AFC title game, not when you're facing the Chiefs for the 4th time in the playoffs, including your 2nd time in the AFC title game. So they go 3 and out, the Chiefs go down, score a touchdown, and it really felt like, oh my God, Kansas City's going to win this game 38-7. But then you remember it's a Chiefs-Bills game. It's going to go down the wire because that's what they always do. And Josh Allen really got his act together. And I thought the interesting thing that Joe Brady did, and I'm sure this is a chat they had at halftime in the locker room, was that they came out in the third quarter and they ran the ball and ran the ball and ran the ball. And I'm sure they said, hey, look, we can run the ball straight down their throats. That's exactly what we're going to do. In the third quarter, 16 plays. There were 15 runs and just 1 pass, Mike. So they clearly saw a weakness, something they could exploit, and it worked. I mean, Buffalo was running up and down the field in the third quarter. If they had kind of had that thought process earlier in the game, maybe the second or the first half would have been a little more interesting. They wouldn't have fallen behind 21-10. But obviously they did get their act together and tie the game back up at 29. So it worked out, except for they didn't win.
If there was any criticism, it was really just leaning on the sneaks and not having like a counter off of it. We saw the Eagles a few weeks back run like a little bit of a fake off of the tush push because they got stopped 3 times on tush pushes, including obviously the one we debated off the top of the show, but that was the most in a single game since it started getting collected by NGS in 2016, since they started collecting like tush push. So this is the most any team's gotten stuffed. So hats off to the Chiefs and that defensive interior who played their butts off in those situations. I mean, we saw, and we'll talk about it when we get to the Eagles, but we saw the Commanders could fold like a blanket in those situations. So the Chiefs didn't. I mean, like that was like where I thought the Bills lost that game, was just in those short yard situations. Usually they're so automatic. Usually they get the ball at the 3-yard line. It's a touchdown. They're 3 yards away with 2 downs to go. They're converting a third down. They're converting on those downs. And they had a few times today where they didn't. So that to me was where, if there's any criticism for Joe Brady, it was in those situations.
Yeah, and I thought Tony Romo made a good note during the game while that was happening, because on most of these kind of sneaks where they're doing their version of the tush push, Josh Allen was going kind of the left side behind that left guard, and Romo pointed out that that's what the Chiefs were expecting, because that's what the Bills' tendency is. So you got to switch up your tendencies in a situation like that. It really felt like, if you ever seen the movie Zoolander, where Zoolander can't turn left, well, the Bills couldn't go left. They couldn't go behind the left guard in this game because the Chiefs were just ready for it every single time. And that's where the Chiefs were expecting a fastball, and that's what they got. The Bills need to throw a curveball or a knuckleball there, and they just kept going with the same play. And look, I understand when you have a quarterback the size of Josh Allen, you think that, hey, they stopped it once, they got lucky. They stopped it twice, they got lucky. But at some point, you got to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, we have James Cook back here. Why are we only giving him 13 carries or whatever he ended up with? Let's try something else, because this clearly isn't working. So, yeah, I do agree that Joe Brady probably, again, if they could have just kind of figured things out faster, maybe this would have been a more fortunate ending for them.
Yeah. I do have to say this. I mentioned the trade about, the Trent McDuffie, Kaiir Elam situation. The Chiefs also did win out, in my opinion, and in this game, obviously, in the Xavier Worthy versus Keon Coleman debate as well, because Keon Coleman in this game, 4 targets, 1 catch, 12 yards. Xavier Worthy in this game, the leading receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, 6 catches on 7 targets, 85 yards, a touchdown. That guy, I mean, when you can run a 4-2-1 and you could also run a whip route the way he can, it's like you don't have a lot of options other than just try to get your hands on him as soon as possible and just chuck the shit out of him, because if he's in space, you're probably screwed.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you mentioned how far Kaiir Elam was playing off him. They had the 2nd and goal play in the 4th quarter. The Chiefs from the Bills' 17-yard line after Mahomes took that sack, and he threw that quick pass to Worthy, but it was incomplete because it hit the ground. But Elam was playing like 12 yards off. Like, what are you doing? It was interesting. Clearly worried about that. I think the Bills did all of this to themselves. It's the Bills' fault that the AFC can't beat the Chiefs, because it isn't just the Xavier Worthy trade. The Patrick Mahomes trade, it was the Bills trading away the 10th overall pick to the Chiefs, who then went up to 10, grabbed Mahomes. They grabbed Worthy in another draft trade, and those are the last 2 trades the Chiefs and Bills have made in the draft. So you're just talking about the Bills dug their own grave. They dug the Bengals, the Ravens, they dug all the graves for everyone, and they just let the Chiefs take over the AFC. They only have themselves.
That's a great point. I mean, they have that. That's like a curse. They put. I can't remember. It wasn't, obviously, I don't think it was Brandon Beane who was the GM back then. I can't remember who it was for the Bills, but whoever it was, I think put a curse on the franchise to where they'll always be at the doorstep. But that trade and not taking Patrick Mahomes, that situation, well, a lot of regrets for a lot of people, because obviously went 10th overall.